are back at Horseshoe Bend. I don't know if y'all remember last time we were here during the pandemic. We came a couple times and the visitor center was closed due to the pandemic. So we've never been inside the actual visitor center, and also we did not have access to the restrooms. So that was a lot of anxiety. We'd have to go to the McDonald's, drive here, do the activity, and then be like, oh, we gotta, be done before we have to use the restroom. So this is kind of making it a little more relaxed, and we're curious as to what we're gonna see. Behind me there is a family and also a blue cannon. Remember we talked about how during this Indian War times the cannons were painted pale blue as an homage to the French for some reason, and by the Civil War the cannons are bigger and they're green.
Cannon.
And we call them cannons. If you're some sort of artillery expert, you're gonna know we have no idea what we're talking about with cannons. It's just like all the guns have names and stuff. We don't know those.
The restrooms are over there in that building.
Yeah, and they're now open, and it's kind of an obsession with us because we hydrate, because you're supposed to hydrate a lot, and you just don't want to be stuck somewhere where you can't use the bathroom. And sometimes we'll be on a trip somewhere else and they'll be like, oh, there's a national park, there's going to be like a little museum and a bathroom. That was kind of how we saw cow pens,
Yeah.
because oh well, if nothing else we can have a little break from the road. So it was very sad when everything was shut down. So I'm very glad that things are opening again. Okay, the bathroom has this stuff called Soft Touch Waterless Hand Cleanser. Have you ever seen anything like this? It comes out and it's like cottage cheese. I guess there's no water in it, but then you mix it with water, and I don't know. I just thought it was interesting, but maybe it's just weird to point it out.
Oh, that's interesting. For your travel information.
I've never seen that before. And I asked Brian if he saw it in his restroom, and he doesn't remember it. He was in there 5 seconds ago. He doesn't remember it. So I'm like, hey, I just want to point this out.
And I did wash my hands.
I don't know. Sometimes I notice stuff that he doesn't notice.
Face masks.
Oh yeah, you can wear a mask if you want. And then the stamps. The stamps you always like if you buy a book in the bookstore, you can stamp the date and the park you're, so in the future, oh, I remember that time, this is that date, and this park is where I got this book. So that's something I do a lot. Or there's the little passport for the Junior Rangers. For a while I was really doing the Junior Ranger stuff, but I don't know. Some of the Rangers think you're weird when you do it, and it's like you're old, so I'm kind of not doing it as much.
It's a shame.
I know. Some have been really fine with it. Others have been like, ugh, it's bad enough I have to do it with kids, now I have to do it with a grown-up.
In memory of the soldiers and Indian allies who died in combat with the Upper Creek Indians during the Horseshoe Bend campaign in the Creek War of 1813 to 1814.
Would y'all like a brochure?
Sure.
Have you been here before?
We have been here, but it was during the pandemic and the place was closed, so we've done the grounds, but we haven't actually been in the visitor center yet.
Yeah.
So this is really exciting for us.
Well, we have a newly renovated museum you might want to take a look at.
Cool.
And I've got a bunch of folks back here watching the movie right now, but when they're done, about 10, 15 minutes, I can start it from the beginning.
Oh, that would be awesome. You want to see the movie now? Yeah. Thank you. The newly renovated museum is quite nice and should house a nice history for this battlefield. Perpetual blessing blanket. It's described by them as evoking elements of the Creek creation story, presented by the Muskogee Creek Nation to show they are still alive and well and support the efforts here. Here we have the tribal resolution. Deeper into the exhibits. This is a small place, but packed with historical information.
Look, here's a quote from Benjamin Hawkins. Oh. Remember we saw his grave?
Check the pinned comment for previous relevant videos. The Creeks trace their ancestry through their mothers and the female line, but men held all the leadership positions in the tribe. They have a number of artifacts from Creek civilization. They lived off the land, agriculture, hunting, and trade with Europeans. They were not primitive.
I like when they have where you can feel the pelts.
Yeah.
I remember when we were in Kansas, they had the buffalo.
Yeah. That's amazing.
They had quite an extensive trade business with England.
Like, they were really culturally advanced.
And they tried diplomacy, but European civilization began to encroach, and the way things went is what you'd expect. We all know the stories of the Americans' treaties with the Indians.
Well, and remember they probably split off, they were all probably from the same ancestors. But everybody in the southeast was basically from the Creeks, and then they started with Outlaw.
The Creeks were farmers, but they were also warriors. Benjamin Hawkins attempted to convince the Indians to assimilate, knowing what the future would hold.
Yeah, I remember when Benjamin Hawkins was like trying to help the Creeks.
Yeah, so it's just that tension between the ones who would farm versus the ones that were resisting.
Yeah.
And some did.
Remember, I told you that the U.S. government got some of the
And some didn't. Some took up arms, and I don't blame them. Their resistance was completely understandable.
All right, and then also broken off here with the Choctaw and the Chickasaw. They kind of split. Creeks, this battle was
Enter Tecumseh.
they recruited, they sent, all right, so where did all of the Indians pretty much end up? Right here. Right here.
Here is the Red Stick's weapon of choice and their namesake.
And so it's a lot of
Here is the spark that set a war ablaze. The U.S. press has seldom been constructive. Enter Andrew Jackson. And we arrive here, Horseshoe Bend. Look for that episode pinned in the comments.
Anyone that hasn't seen the movie, I could start it for you at any time.
We went to see the movie. I'll pin that too. A Creek warrior known as a Red Stick stands beside the barricade at the site of the battle. This is of course a mock-up within the museum, but the site is right down the drive.
Served in the Tennessee militia under John Cobb, he was mounted infantry during the Creek War. He served as a scout and took part in the Battle of Talladega and Crockett called an attack on the Leash Congressman to Crockett opposed Andrew Jackson's Indian Removal Act. Said it would be ashamed in the day of judgment. When Crockett failed to win the re-election, he fought in the Texas Revolution and was killed at the Battle of Yale. 40 years. Bilingual and bicultural due to his Scots-American father, Ross traveled frequently to Washington, D.C. to negotiate on behalf of Cherokees. In 1838, his
Here.
Not quite, almost.
Okay, so did you see the balls? So there's a 6 pound and there's a 3 pound.
Yeah, how we were talking out front about the cannon, we didn't know, but it's
But then I remembered in our other one we talked about this. So there's like it's like the size of the ball. But when we look at a cannon, like I cannot look at like a gun and be like, oh, that's a 6 pounder, that's a 3 pounder. That's like a skill I don't have. But we do know from what we've learned here that they fired 6 pounds and 3 pounds, and it did nothing against the wall.
and all these were actually found out there.
Yes.
Retrieved from the ground 2 centuries later, these grim relics tell a hard story. So arrowheads, grape shot, cannonballs.
Okay, so the movie's really good. We're gonna drop a link to it, and you can watch it yourself. We really recommend it, and we may have even linked it last time. But yeah, it's really good. And we found that it's interesting to tour the battlefield and then watch the movie. It seemed like it made it easier to understand what was happening.
In 1814, Cherokee warrior journalist led a contingent of
This is kind of neat. It's a little timeline. So I guess it starts at noon, and then it just sort of gives you high level, very high level what happened.
And there's instructions. Turn to read more. Goes to the end of the Creek War. The aftermath of Horseshoe Bend didn't go well for any of the creeks, upper or lower. The damage to their civilization was terrible.
Okay. All right, kiddos, let's bring your books. All right, stand nicely.
And eventually they were, of course, removed, not just the creeks. It's a sad and tragic time.
One thing the museum really wants you to know is that the Muskogee Creeks are still together. They perform like their traditional crafts and tapestries and language. They want to keep the language alive.
But there are creeks here today, and they have a modern society with close ties to their past. At the end of the day, the creeks did what they had to do, as anyone would.